we have Stormy from Firefox OS, Mozilla. He's here and he's going to talk to us about what's really going on with Mozilla right now and the future.
Thanks, Jeremy.
All right, thank you.
So as Jeremy said, I'm Stormy Peters from Mozilla. I manage the websites and developer engagement team. So in addition to making all of the websites based on users and consumers, we also make all of the developer websites. Because one of our goals is that when people make websites or web apps, that they make them in a way that's accessible to everybody using open technologies and open standards. So whenever I go to talk, I always have like one thing. I always try to get one thing that I take away from it. You know, I sat through enough boring presentations and boring meetings. I'm like, I have to start thinking about what's the one thing I took away from this. So I thought I'd start out by telling you the one thing I hope you take away from this. And I'll explain a little bit about how I got to where I'm at as part of that. So I actually started out in Unix land. Right out of college, I went and wrote Unix code for HP. And I ended up managing the CDE team, because like all good engineers, I got promoted to management, because those are really similar jobs. And so I was managing the CDE team, and it was really frustrating to me that I had a team of 20 people, 20 and 30 people, that fixed bugs and added features to CDE. And so did Compaq, and so did Solaris, and so did Sun, and so did a whole bunch of other companies. And so I really got into open source software because I saw it as a way to collaborate, a way that we could all work together so that we could bring new technology to people faster and better. And then I did that for a long time, 15 years. And I started going to talks, and I'd be talking about the desktop, and I'd be talking about free software, about Linux, GNOME, and I realized what I was most worried about was the web. So I was starting to use all of these web services, and all my friends and family were, and they weren't open. So I was using Gmail and Flickr, really awesome technologies. They had APIs people could download things from, but people didn't know how to use them in a way that gave them freedom or control. So most of my friends and family, they're using, how many people here use web-based email for their primary email account, personal email account? So most everybody. And how many, and this is a really savvy group, right? How many people in this room actively back it up? So if you couldn't log in tomorrow because the service went out of service, or they decided you weren't you anymore and you couldn't prove it to them anymore, how many people have a good backup? So it wasn't all the same hands. And that really scares me, and that's why I'm at Mozilla. Because I want to put people in control of their data, people in control of their privacy, and make sure they have choices and that they understand what they're doing. So the one thing that I would like to make sure you take away is that, and not just that, but that you are the ones that are going to do that. So you as developers, as technology evangelists, are the people that are going to help make sure that happens. And you're going to help tell your friends and family how they should be doing it, making sure that the systems that they pick and that they choose have those options. So Mozilla's making a phone, so that's probably what I'm going to talk to you about today. It's a Firefox OS phone. And I'm curious, how many people here have, so it's not just yet another phone, it's different, and I want to talk about that. So I'm curious, how many people here have one mobile phone? Should be everybody. How many people have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, wow, 9. I don't have 9, by the way, I shouldn't be holding my hand up. 9 devices there, 9 over there too. Anybody have 10? 10 in the back, couple, 11. All right, who thinks I have the biggest numbers? Throw it. He does? All right, you'll have to compare notes later. So this is a crowd that likes mobile devices, which is awesome. So I'm going to tell you about one that I think is really cool. And I have my own personal pet peeve. I love this one because it's smaller than my other Android phones that I use. But why is Mozilla making a phone? It's to promote openness, innovation, and opportunity on the web. To make sure that users are in control, that users have privacy options, that if they're using Facebook or Twitter, they're sharing what they want to share and not sharing what they don't want to share. And that they also can create. It's very important to us that creation not be held in the hands of a few, that anybody who uses the web can create their own web page, their own web app. And so why a phone? And the reason is because the next 2 billion people that come online in the next 5 years are going to come online on a phone. So their very first experience is not going to be a laptop or a desktop computer at school. Their very first experience is probably going to be a smartphone of some sort. maybe a tablet. And you can kind of see this in our country right now. So my kids don't want to use a computer. They really couldn't care less about the computer on my desk. They just want to play with my phone or my tablet. And one of the things about these 2 billion people when they come online is they're going to think differently and they're going to do things differently because their first experience is online. And I went to this really cool talk. It was actually a while ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago. And this guy talked about all of these businesses that had started up in Africa around cell phones because cell phones were coming to rural areas not just before computers. Cell phones were coming to rural areas before they even had power. So I couldn't find the picture that he used, but he actually had a guy whose business, he had a bicycle, and then he strapped a car battery on the back of the bicycle, and he would ride out to these remote villages and charge people to charge up their cell phones. So when you think about like how people are going to use these new phones, not just new phones, but all smartphones in developing countries, and the new people that come online, we need to think about the new ways that they're going to use it as well. So they're getting it before they have power. We've done some user studies like in Brazil and Colombia to try to better understand the markets that people are using these phones in first. And like in Brazil, people all have more than one SIM card. And the reason they have that is to find the cheapest value per minute and per text. And so they get like some certain number included, and then they'll actually switch out their SIM card to a second SIM card and use it for the rest of the month. And they're trying to get the most value for the month that they can. And they don't use data. They turn it off because it's very expensive or not very available. Or they'll be at home and they'll actually take their phone down to the local coffee shop, download the app or whatever they want to use, and then go back home and use it. So when we think about developing apps and phones for these next 2 billion people that come online, it's actually going to be a very different use case. And right now, if we look at the ecosystem in mobile, and one of the reasons that Mozilla is making a phone, is that they're very isolated verticals. So if you're going to develop an app, you have to decide whether you're going to develop an app for Apple and iOS, or if you're going to develop an app for Android and Google. And it's not so much about whether or not they're open platforms or not, whether they're open source or not, but that you have to target each one separately, and that there aren't standards between them. So if you look at what Mozilla did in the browser space, it was the same thing. So we had Internet Explorer, and there was no standard. So what we did by creating Firefox and pushing forward with standards is create a standard for how all web browsers and how all web pages should act. So that as a web developer, not always true, but most of the time you can create a web page and you can pretty comfortably know now that it will run on any browser. That didn't used to be true when browsers started. So the same thing right now is happening in the mobile phone industry, and we saw it, and so we have to help fix that too. So right now, if you're going to develop an app and you develop it for Apple, it won't work on an Android device. And so we want to make sure that when you develop a web page or web app, it'll run on any computer, on any tablet, or on any phone. So I'm curious here, how many people are app developers? Maybe it just made an app, even if it's not like, okay. And how many people have targeted, have written one for iOS? And how many have written one for Android? Awesome. So for those of you who can't see, it was about, I don't know, about a third of the room, and there was definitely more Android developers than iOS developers. How many people do more than one of these platforms, whether it's Windows or iOS? So just a couple. So most people pick to do one or the other. And that's the solutions we're seeing. So right now, if you're a developer, you have to kind of pick your audience. You can't target the entire world. You have to pick your audience. Are you targeting Android users? Are you targeting iOS users? Are you targeting Windows users? Or you have to become an expert in multiple different platforms and multiple different programming languages, which we all are over the course of our life, but it's hard to maintain your app in 2 completely different platforms at the same time. And then what we see companies do is they'll usually have teams. You'll actually see, like, I'm an Android user well now hopefully I'm a Firefox OS user, but as an Android user I had to wait for Evernote to come to Android. And then they had to actually go out and hire Android developers and start a whole new team to port their app to another platform. And then there's a set of businesses that have come out, like PhoneGap and Titanium, that will let you write once and run anywhere. It's not perfect yet because they still haven't been able to use all of the device-specific capabilities of each one. PhoneGap does support Firefox OS right now. So this is the problem that the web's familiar with. As I alluded to before, in the browser space, we pushed really hard. We worked with all the other browser vendors, and we made a standard that works across, the W3C and all the organizations that are part of it. have made a web standard that we've all agreed on. And that when you use a browser, you can count on certain HTML tags being there, and you can count on certain characteristics. And you can run a web page on a whole bunch of different devices, including your phones. And so we need to bring that to the app space. The web today is ready. Sometimes you get some pushback that the web isn't ready. I'll talk more specifically about web APIs, but the web right now is ready to run apps on a phone. So you can write a HTML, JavaScript-based app that does pretty much everything any app that you can install on your phone does. And it's not only ready that the phones are out. I said that one before is from Colombia. We've actually released the phones in Spain, Colombia, Venezuela, and Poland right now. And I included this picture because my 6-year-olds, my kids are so excited that I'm working on a phone. Not that I know much about making phones, but they think I have a big part in it. And my 6-year-old was really excited, and he said, "So are you guys going to be on TV? Like, are you going to have a TV ad?" And I said, "No, I don't think Firefox OS is going to be on TV. Sorry, kiddo." And then the next day, one of my colleagues sent around a commercial that Deutsche Telekom was doing in Poland, in Polish, and they sent the YouTube version of it around. And so I played it for him. I was like all excited, we're on TV. And he watched it, and he did that little 6-year-old thing. He looked at me and said, "That sounds really weird." He walked off. That was Polish. So I kind of asked these questions before. I wanted to ask, so how many of those of you who have developed apps for one platform or the other, how many have tried to use PhoneGap or have tried to port it to another application? Anybody? A couple of people have done that. Did it work pretty well? No? All right. How many of you are web developers? Like have created a web page? I can raise my hand on that one. And how many of you have created some kind of, well, I'll get to that. Cool. So what I wanted to say is that, like, when you're a web developer now, there's more that's available. So when you run a web page on a phone, you no longer have to just use typical web page stuff that we used when we're thinking desktops. You now have access to, well, if you use an app, you now have access to all of the hardware specifics on the phone. So you can make it vibrate, you can check what the screen orientation is. So as you're developing just regular web pages, you should be thinking about that. Because some next 2 billion people that get online will look at your web page on a mobile screen. So if it's not responsive already, if you're not taking advantage of those things, now's the time. So I wanted to ask what you guys thought the advantages of creating an app are versus creating a web page. So what are some of the reasons that those of you that raised your hand that have built an app, why did you go and build an app instead of a web page? And they're very specific reasons, I'm not trying to challenge it. So
the sensors.
The sensors, so you could get access to, like, if there was light in the room, or how they're holding it?
Offline content.
Offline content. Have you used App Cache?
No.
Okay, App Cache is a way you can get offline content from something. Better performance.
Look and feel.
Look and feel. So because it gives you native look and feel, so it looks like the rest of the phone. Any other reasons? I'm curious. So why an app instead of a web page? Some of the other reasons, so the sensors, device hardware access, local storage. The other one that I've heard is installation and home screen icons. Like, users expect to be able to download their app, and they expect to have a home screen. They want to have a link to it, and they don't think of links to web pages. They think of links to apps, which I also think gets to. I actually really think that apps are kind of a stepping gap to where the future will be. I mean, it's kind of weird that anything I want to do on my phone, I have to go look for it and install it and then use it. This is really apparent if you give your phone to like a 6-year-old, and he knows he can install anything that says free. And so in the course of looking for a good game, he will install 20 games on my phone within 5 minutes, just to play one. And then the next time I give him the phone, he doesn't play that one, he goes and downloads 20 more, looking for a fun game. And to me, that speaks of someone who's used to playing with the web, where you just kind of explore and you browse and you look at web pages and not the app model. So to make your web page into an app, it's really easy. This is the manifest file. This is literally all you would have to do. You could copy and paste and maybe take out Robert's name. I borrowed Robert's manifest file. And you're basically just telling it where it lives and what logo you want associated with it and that type of stuff. And this will make it'll still run from your server in this case. So the user will be able to go into the marketplace, whether it's Firefox Marketplace or any other marketplace, and they'll be able to see your app, and they'll be able to click it, install it, and put it on their phone, and they'll be able to launch it from an icon, and it'll look like any other app, and it'll be running from your server in the back end. So all the updates and everything will be done on your server. But what if you wanted to do more? What if you wanted access to those hardware sensors? What if you wanted local storage? What if what could you do? So we're working on web APIs, and web API is the name that the group working on. It's not a Mozilla thing, it's Mozilla, Google, and others working together. What are the things that you can do on your phone? So we're working on making them standards. So it'd be like any web page, any app could use that, and you would know whether you got installed on a Chromium device or on a Firefox OS device, that if you asked for the orientation, you could ask in the same way and expect the same answer. And some are standards already, so like geolocation and others are standards, and then some are still working on becoming standards, like how do you access contacts on the phone from an HTML, from JavaScript? How do we do that in a standard way? So it's pretty much there. So if you want to develop a web app and you want access to everything on the phone, I think the two last I checked were like, it's Bluetooth and USB, that type of connectivity. There's also areas that we haven't thought of, that we hadn't, when you started, you didn't think about as hardware, but things like contacts and calendar that we're still working on and figuring out and agreeing with the other vendors how those should be accessed. And this is really the time. There's something, like you have a lot of experience working with phones, you have a lot of experience working with apps. If there's things that you want to be able to access on the phone, or ideas for using it in really different ways, like Pearl's talk earlier where you put the case in with NFC and it does different things, like now's the time to be feeding those requirements back into these discussions and letting people know where you see the future going and how you think you can use your phone. If you want to, this is from the Mozilla Wiki. I didn't include the URL, but at any point in time you can go there. You can see the list of all the web APIs that exist with links to how to use them and more information. You can see a short description here, and you can also see where they are in the standardization process. So whether you want to be a really early adopter and try it out and it works on a couple phones, or whether you want to wait till it's a standard and it works across the board, all the browsers and all the phones, you can check the status there. And there's two types of open web apps that I kind of alluded to when I showed the manifest file. So if you create a manifest file just like that when you're creating a hosted app, and you basically just create a manifest file, you host your application off your website, off the Mozilla Firefox Marketplace, or off of any other marketplace, or you can create a packaged app. And with a packaged app, you provide it as a zip file, and because of security, you have more access to the things on the phone and on the device. So the main difference is the hosted apps, which is where it's hosted somewhere and the user's actually online and using it from their phone. It needs to be online to run. So most places like in the US and in Europe and in Asia, that's fine. For countries like a lot of the countries in South America, that doesn't work very well. The resources are hosted on the server. You can use App Cache to use it offline, but it's not quite the same, and it has less access to some of the APIs for security reasons. Then a packaged app is one that you've packaged up and put in a zip file, and when the user installs it, they actually get the zip file with everything in it, and they install it on their phone, and it's completely standalone on their phone, so it's offline by default. It can still access the web when it needs to, but the whole app runs by itself on the phone. And it has a lot more API access, because at that point it could have been, you can verify it and it can be trusted. And then the update process is a little more complicated, so you actually have to package up a new zip file and republish it to the marketplace, our marketplace, wherever you put it. You can't just send the update the next time the user launches the app. If there are any questions or comments, I'm happy to make this interactive. I realize I'm talking really fast with lots of people. And I'm competing with lunch. So where will these web apps run? So these web apps will run in any browser. This is actually the logo for Firefox Aurora. I'll mention it. How many people use Firefox? You don't have to make me feel good. How many people use a beta version or a nightly or an Aurora? So the betas and the nightlies and the Auroras are like the earlier release versions. So if you want to test a lot of the Firefox OS simulator work, you want to grab the Aurora version because it has a lot more of the features in there. It'll also run on your phone. So these web apps will run on a browser, on your desktop. You can install them on your desktop. They'll also run on phones. And they not just run on Firefox OS phones, they also run on Android phones. So right now you could go, if you have an Android phone, you could download the Firefox Marketplace from the Play Store. And then once you do that, you can install any of the Open Web Apps that are in Mozilla's Firefox Marketplace. So this is key for developers. When we first started working on this, everyone wants a phone and wants to see what their app looks like on a phone. But if you'd also like to make sure that the app you build can be used by all your friends and family, if your friends and family are Android users, they can use your app even without a Firefox OS phone. Same experience. This is the Firefox Marketplace. I think this is an old screenshot, actually, I realized this morning. It's live. You can publish your app there. We're working on adding more features that are more beneficial to developers, so you can buy an app now, so you can make money from selling your app there. We're looking at different, adding in, in-app payments and different things like that. But the Firefox Marketplace is live and active. And then one of the things that we believe will make a difference for developers is this adaptive search approach to phones. So right now, if you want to find an app for your Android phone or for your iPhone, you go to the store and you search and you download. Same with if you want to. So we want to bring, I should have done the nifty little camera thing that Pearl did. But if you, right now, we want to bring this idea of adaptive search. So I'm using my phone, and I should be able to search for anything and see not only, so I search for Miami, I should be able to see apps that have the word Miami in them, web pages that have the word Miami in them. It should just show me things that are relevant to where I am and what I'm doing on my phone, just much like the web works. Like if you search on the web, it shows you lots of different possibilities. So it shouldn't be constrained to what's installed on my phone. So that's the idea of adaptive search. So that benefits developers in that if you develop an app, you can put it on the Firefox Marketplace, it can be your web page and hosted there. When a user searches for it, they should find things that are relevant for them. So your apps are now discoverable by the entire world, not just by the people that use the Play Store. And they're also ranked in the hierarchy by relevancy, not just by their ratings in the App Store. And then I wanted to point out that if you make an app, you can publish it in the Firefox Marketplace. And obviously, everyone that has a Firefox OS phone gets the Marketplace. People on Android can also get it. But we want to be, this is all open. So the entire phone is open source, it has a Linux kernel, it has the Gecko, which is the Firefox runtime engine in it. It's completely open source. So is the Marketplace. So we debated a lot when we started. We had a lot of really interesting debates about pornography. Should we allow pornography in the store? What were the laws around pornography? What were the laws in the different countries where we were going to release? And then we thought if we get into that, like we're always going to be, if we have our own marketplace, at some level we're a gatekeeper for the quality and the types of things that are in there. And we don't want to be a gatekeeper for everything that's available in the world. So you can actually open your own store. It's completely open source. You can launch your own store. So if someone wanted to create a niche store for Bulgarian food apps or something, they could. They could create an entire marketplace that was just dedicated to that. Much the way you can open an Android phone store in your neighborhood and just sell Android phones. By the way, this is a Geek's phone. They're a small company in Spain, a small startup company. The CTO is, I think he's in his 20s, he's young. And they actually started out by creating an Android store. So they he and this other guy decided they wanted to sell Android devices. They were really excited about them. They opened a store in Madrid and sold Android devices. They ended up selling more of them online than they sold in the store. And so when the Firefox OS came out, they said, that matches our values, we want to make one. So they worked with a company in China, and they worked with, I think they had contractors in various different places. They made an entire phone, this little tiny startup in Spain. And anyone can do that. You have to work with us if you want to put the Firefox OS branding on it. But just to make the phone with all of the boot to Gecko Firefox OS software on it, you can do that. So that's really about enabling people. And then you can create your own store. So some of the carriers that we're talking to want to create their own marketplaces. Some of them are using Firefoxes. And you can also just host your app on your website. So you could just tell people, go to this URL and install my app, and you don't have to put it in any store. That might be particularly useful if you had a small app you just wanted to put out there for like maybe a conference like this and you didn't care if it was in a marketplace. Or it might be useful if you already have a really strong presence on the web with your own app and you wanted to actually host it from there. So if you want to get started, and speaking of get started, I don't actually know what time I started, so I'll just talk till I'm done, which should be short. So I just want to talk briefly. I'm not going to do a live demo here, but if you want to get started with this right now, you have to download Aurora, so one of the versions of Firefox, early release versions of Firefox, and then you can install an add-on for the Firefox OS simulator. This is what the dashboard would look like. It would show you all of the apps that you had developed or installed in your simulator. And then you can actually launch it. And it looks like on your screen, it has the right resolution. It looks like a little phone is on your screen, and you can test out your app. It's a little hard to test things like screen rotations and vibration and stuff. It has all that, but it's not the same. The other thing you can do is plug your Firefox OS phone straight into your laptop, and it'll actually push the app that you're working on your desktop into the phone and let you do real-time debugging from your desktop. So if anyone's tried to debug a phone while you're using it, it's kind of tricky. This will give you all the access to what's happening on your desktop. We also have some developer tools. Mozilla's not the only one that makes developer tools, but I just wanted to show this quick that we've added a lot of support for mobile-like features, so you can check out like a responsive design within the Mozilla developer tools right inside your browser, so that you don't have to download it to different devices or play with it. So why are we building a phone? We're building a phone because we believe that the web phones, the mobile ecosystem technology, the web should be available and accessible to everybody, and people are going to come online in a phone. And so that's where they're going to be, so that's where we have to be if we want to make sure that they realize that they have control over, they should be able to, anything on the web they should have access to on their mobile device. And all of those things on the web, they should also realize that they're things that they can create themselves. So I hope that like when kids in Colombia or kids in Brazil or kids in Poland get a phone and play with it, they go, wow, I could create an app like that. I think as Michael Hall and I were talking, his kids think that all games have levels that you can create them for because he has them on an open source game where they can create new levels for the games. That's pretty cool. It's pretty cool that people realize they can change their environment. So what's in it for you? A whole new audience and a whole lot, hopefully a lot more, you can give users a lot more power and a lot more control. There's also new devices to be had. We've worked really hard to keep them low cost, especially for developers. So this is the Geeks Phone one that came out. I believe it retailed for 91 euros, which I think is like $120. So we're trying really hard, not just to make it accessible for developers here, but to make it as accessible as possible for developers around the world, even in countries that might have lower cost of living. So it's a whole new world. What do you think is in it for you? Like what excites you about the phone? Any questions for me? Anything?
You mentioned that people can make their own app store for Firefox OS. Can you have more than one app store installed on the phone at the same time so you can get apps from either one?
Yes. So that app store just looks like another icon that you it's an app.
Okay, so it'll be a separate app. It won't integrate with the one that you ship? Like if Verizon wanted to make an app store, would it be separate?
Yes, you could install from their app store or from our app store. If Verizon's not a partner, right, or not a public partner as far as I know, or private partner as far as I know, but if they, I don't want to start rumors on my press team, will get upset. But if they shipped a phone, they would most likely only put their marketplace on it, I imagine. But then you could still download any other marketplace you wanted to. I should point out, I said the kernel is Linux, it then runs Gecko, which is like the Firefox rendering engine, runtime engine, and then it has the whole UI is called Gaia, and it's pretty much like a web app. So the whole user interface is a web app. So you could actually take the phone and change the contact dialer on it. You could replace it basically. You could replace the whole interface, the whole look and feel on it. So all of that is accessible. And we've already had some people do some really cool gear UIs for it.
Are there any devices that we could get soon or today? I mean, from what I just Googled, we can't really find a place where we can get our hands on a device to test with.
Yes, I'm working on that. We came out with this one and it sold out within weeks. So you could have bought this on the web if you'd been there in the first 3 days it launched. So we're working, Geeks One's actually making another one for this fall, and we're working on some other options. I also have, I'm really curious, and maybe you guys can help me, we can't go to conferences and hand out phones to everybody. We're just not big enough to be able to afford to do it that way. But I'd really love to get phones in the hands of people who want to help further this mission. So if anyone has an idea for how to best reach the audience, we've done different things, we do app workshops where you can come and you make an app and we give you a phone to help you test it and spread the word. We did phones for apps, where if you develop an app, we send you a phone. And it's not so much we want to pay for the apps, we want to pay for we want to help engaged people further the mission. So if you have ideas for how to get phones to the right group of developers, and this is probably the right group, please send me an email and let me know. But we're also trying to make them available for $100.
Yeah, this is kind of a part on to what he was saying, and kind of an answer to that. I would say that the biggest thing that could be done would be kind of like what Ubuntu is doing, where if you have a Nexus 4 or something, you can just easily, get it onto there and then start developing. I think that'd be the quickest way to kind of grab, our community, because most of us have devices similar or like that.
Thanks. You can do that now. It's really hard at the moment.
Oh, okay.
We started out with the Nexus S actually.
Okay.
And that was our primary development phone. But then targeting developing countries, it's a really different device.
Yeah.
The screen is much smaller, and we wanted to. So we haven't maintained that part, but it is open source and
Okay.
it would take some work.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hi, I have a question about release cycles. So the web, sometimes I feel like it changes quite rapidly. But if you put an operating system on a phone or a hardware device, it usually doesn't see updates. So does Firefox OS have any ideas around what the release cycle is for getting new versions of the operating system onto a device that's out in the wild?
Yeah, so we want regular releases, and for the developer devices, we want really regular releases. But it also touches on this interesting question of if you're targeting a developing country where people don't buy a data plan and they don't have wireless infrastructure at home, are they actually going to update? So we know that there's some large portion, especially with the initial Firefox OS users, that will probably never update. Which is kind of a scary thought to those of us who usually check for an update as soon as it goes live. But we are thinking about the regular cadence. We do think the device, it doesn't need to, so it will last for those users' lifespan of the device. Obviously, we want them to update more often because of security reasons, and we're working on the best ways to help them do that.
Hello. Earlier you spoke about the two options for installing the apps, either having it solely on the web or using a zip to install it, but it wouldn't be updatable. Is there any plans for maybe an install or a package that you'll be able to install and you'll be able to update without having to unzip it and load it again?
So it will be updatable. It'll just have to be more of a user draw than something you can update on the server side, like a web page.
Mm-hmm. No, but I meant like an OTA update. Is there any plans for anything like that where we'll be able to pull it from the server?
Yeah, they'll be able to, but you'll have to push it back to the store, like to the marketplace, and then they'll get it from there. They'll get over-the-air updates.
Okay, so they'll have to take the zip and...
The user doesn't know they got a zip.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry, and I'm not the best person always to explain this stuff, but you submit a zip to the marketplace. The user actually, it looks the same to them. They can't tell the difference between the two. All right, I'm around for a bit if anybody wants to come play with the phone.
All right, thank you very much.